Section 35 of the Labor Act 11 of 2007. This section deals with severance pay. In terms of this section, and subject to subsection 2, an employer must pay severance pay to an employee who has completed 12 months of continuous service if the employee is dismissed, if the employee dies while employed, or if the employee resigns or retire on reaching the age of 65 years. Subsection 1 does not apply to a fair dismissal on grounds of misconduct or poor work performance. If the employee unreasonably refuses to be reinstated, it also doesn't apply if the employee unreasonably refuses to accept employment on terms no less favorable than those applicable immediately before the termination of employment with the surviving spouse, heir, or dependent of a deceased employer within 1 month of the death of the employer. It also doesn't apply if the employee unreasonably refuses to accept employment on terms no less favorable than those applicable immediately before the termination of employment with one or more of the former partners within 1 month of the dissolution of the partnership if the employer was a partnership. So if the employer has died and the employee has been offered and the employment terminates, but they were immediately offered another employment where the terms of employment are not less favorable than the one for the employment that is terminating, either by the heir or whoever is taking over from the dead employer, or even by the partners of the deceased partner, then that employee is not entitled to severance payment. Severance pay is, in terms of subsection 1, must be in an amount equal to at least 1 week's remuneration for each year of continuous service with the employer. So if one has worked for 2 years, then they are entitled to at least payment of 2 weeks of the salary that they were earning. When calculated, the length of an employee's service for the purpose of subsection 1 and 3, the following rules apply. If the employer is an individual and dies and the employee is employed subsequently by the surviving spouse, heir, or dependent of the deceased employer, the employee retains any service acquired before the employer's death. So in that case of takeover, then you retain the service, or you're treated as if you were not dismissed or employment was not terminated. If the employer was a partnership that was dissolved and the employee is employed subsequently by one or more of the former partners of that partnership, the employee retains any service acquired before the dissolution of the partnership. So if a partner of a deceased partner then takes you over as an employee, then the service acquired before the dissolution of partnership is retained. If the employer's business has been transferred to another person and the employee continues in the service of that business after the transfer, the employee retains any service acquired before the transfer of that business. The service of an employee who works for the same employer on a seasonal basis for 2 or more successive years is regarded as continuous, provided that the period of service is made up of the periods actually worked. So if you work here and then you go on holiday, or work gets finished and then you start again, if you work seasonal but you've been doing it for 2 years, then you can also qualify for severance payment. Continuous service includes any period of employment contemplated in section 29. The payment of severance pay in terms of this section does not affect an employee's right to any other amount that the employer is obliged to pay the employee. So at termination, you're still entitled to your leave days and any other payment that was supposed to be done. So severance payment doesn't substitute those payments that you are entitled to as an employee. If the contract of employment is terminated as a result of the death of the employee, and in the absence of a will, the employer must pay the severance pay to the employee's surviving spouse if they were married, if there is no spouse, to the employee's children, and if there are no children, again, it must be paid into the estate of that deceased person. Ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of this discussion. Section 35, let us please engage, let us comment below, let us ask questions, and let's engage and learn. Thank you.